Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be joined by our next guest, Jeff Jowdy. He is the president and founder of Lighthouse Counsel. How are you doing, Jeff?
I am doing fantastic, Jeremy. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and grateful for all the good news that you share. Thank you.
Absolutely. So your world, we get to talk a lot about working with nonprofits, fundraising, philanthropic trends. Give us a little background before we dive in, though. Give us some background on Lighthouse Counsel.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Lighthouse Counsel, we partner with, we say, respected nonprofits to help them be more successful in fulfilling their mission. And as you just mentioned, we do that in three ways: fundraising, strategic planning, and board development. And we're based here in Nashville and have an office in Athens, Georgia. We were founded in 1999. We've served about 200 clients over the years all across the country. But this is our home, and we're proud to be here, have an awesome team of 12 that help us to serve our clients with excellence. So.
Talk about being a member of the Giving Institute and what that means to you all as well.
Absolutely. This is something that I've been in this business too many decades to share, but growing up in the business and attending conferences, there was an old kind of blue ribbon group called the Association of Fundraising Counsel, and so that is what is now the Giving Institute, and it's a consortium of, I think, about 75 or 80 firms. Some of them are consulting firms like ours. Some of them are in technology and media and other allied areas for serving nonprofits in fundraising. And one of the, not only do they stand for high ethics and best practices, and so we were proud and honored to be admitted as a member, but they are also the parent organization for what is called Giving USA. And Giving USA is the leading report indicator on giving in America and has been for decades. So a lot of people know about Giving USA. They may not know about the Giving Institute if they're in the nonprofit arena, but it's basically the parent organization for Giving USA.
And that obviously gives you access to a wealth of information, reporting, benchmarking. So from a resources standpoint, it gives you a tremendous amount of access.
It does. It's wonderful because we got all these colleagues at the table, and some of them are competitors, friendly competitors, when they're all over the nation, and some of them are smaller than us, and a lot of them are a lot larger than us. But we actually have a board meeting tomorrow that I'll be on, and then a whole day of education. So it gives you that, networking where people can share ideas, and again, with friendly competitors and just some folks that are awfully smart. And then the research piece, like the Giving USA, is so important. And the Giving Institute also does research and data for firms like ours that help us to be more effective in serving our clients. So it's a great resource and something that we definitely can leverage for our clients.
So let's talk about the trends before COVID-19, and then we'll talk about what you're seeing now, because I feel like in some cases we're in two different worlds now. But talk a little bit about prior to COVID-19, what were some of the major trends that had your attention? And then we'll switch over, obviously, to what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trends really I'll share with the data from Giving USA. And we're, you lag a year. This was just released in June. So, hot off the press, so to speak. But in 2009, and Americans are incredibly generous, but in 2019, it was the second largest year in giving ever for America. And Americans gave almost $450 billion to charity. And it was an increase of a little over 4% from the previous year. So that was great news and a great year. And, and it's also interesting, when you say trends, it's something that we're big on, is the data. If you think about a lot of our friends in nonprofits and volunteers and board members and some staff, you think about, we're going to raise money. Let's do an event. Let's do a foundation proposal. Let's go to the corporation. Well, the reality is that last year, and this is held true, 70% of the dollars given came from individuals, 69%. 17% by foundations, and foundation growth has been strong, but what has led it? How about the Bill Gates of the world? How about the Warren Buffetts of the world? So a lot of the growth and most of the growth in foundations has actually been these large family foundations that you hear about and see about, the the Zuckerbergs and folks. And so it's still people behind those foundations, right? And then you consider that 10% of the gifts were given by bequests, people impacted that, and then 5% by corporations. So what we encourage folks, it's all about relationships. And 70+%, 70, 80, probably 85 or 90% of the giving is coming from people, not a corporation, not a, so it's relationships.
Yeah, and that's a really critical thing, I think, for those, especially new board members, to understand, is that, to your point, it's all about relationships. And the vast majority comes from individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, everyone's going after the foundations and the corporations and such. But when you look at the percentage, it's a very small percentage relative to the whole versus the individual giving. And like you said, the key is understanding that the power of relationships is what drives fundraising and giving and contributions. And that's really where so much of the magic is.
Amen. And you look at foundation research, this foundation gives to only this location. They only give to Memphis, and then $1 million gift in Nashville. What happened? It's a relationship. They can still, no matter what the policies and even corporate giving, the CEO wants to give to organization C and they never have, and it's outside their parameters. What happens?
Right. That's exactly right.
And it's built on, it's not built on data, it's built on a relationship that he or she wants to make that happen.
Talk about now with COVID-19 and these shifts. And obviously the numbers will come out much, much later in terms of the actual impact, but talk about what you're seeing right now with the major pivots. I'm thinking for so many nonprofits, and you mentioned even like the fundraising events, obviously those have had to morph greatly, where there's now not really many, if any, in-person things happening. Everything is moving to the online platforms. You're seeing even virtual races and 5Ks and bikes and bike rides and things like that. So what are some of the things you're seeing?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, and we've kind of discussed this, but you've got to know your donors if you're in the business, and who are they, and who's impacted and who isn't. And I bet every nonprofit in Nashville could think of a lot of people, to be candid, who really aren't impacted. They've had to stay at home. They may be bored. They probably be receptive to a virtual visit, right? They want to make a difference. I've talked to several, high net worth folks over the past 2 months, and that's what they told me. We're bored. We're going to our farm. We're in Florida. We're restless. I mean, but so many people are affected, and that's sad, and there are organizations addressing that. But it's important for the nonprofits to know amongst their donors who is and who isn't, so you know who they are. And then hopefully over the past, since March especially, they've been leaning into the relationships and staying in touch. And even if they're not a top prospect, they're staying in touch and showing concern and showing appreciation. So the other piece to share is that in the Great Recession, 2008, market dropped 40%. Giving only dropped 7% that year and 6% the next. So 13% decline in giving, 40% decline in the market. So, and those are averages. And what we challenge our clients and others in the nonprofit arena, don't be average. If giving's down 6%, then I guarantee you, and I know there are groups who are up 10, 20, 30%. And there's some that are down more dramatically, right? So don't be average, know your donors. And then really right now, a couple of things real quick would be, and you mentioned it, events. We, more often than not, with almost every client we talk with, we're advising them to stop the events, wean the events, have one signature event. When you analyze the time that goes in, the expense, the staff time, the volunteer time, it's rare the yield is really worth it. So you have maybe cultivation events, you may have one fundraising event, but any organization who is building their fundraising on events, that's not positive. So this is a silver lining, get rid of the events, right?
I was about to say, now it kind of forces that hand. And it goes back to, like you said, the power of relationships is, I think in many cases, events can be a crutch in a good and a bad way, but you lean on those because it gets people involved and you can make some money on it. But when you look at it, like you said, the amount of time and effort, now it's a matter of, okay, let's really do the soul searching. Is it worth it? What does it yield? And now, if you can't hold them, are you putting all your eggs in those baskets where now, if you don't have the events, are you really at detriment versus can you pivot and use those relationships to still draw in the funds that you need to fund your mission?
Yep. Amen. The other piece was would be people are still giving. We're seeing huge gifts still. And we've seen campaigns start up. We're seeing campaigns restart. People don't assume that people can't give. I mean, and that's the climate. Don't listen to the noise, right?
Right.
Know your donors.
Well, even going back to, like you said, with last year and the trend, because I remember all of the legislation and things that people thought, well, with the tax changes and everything, contributions are going to go down. It's going to be really hard for nonprofits because there's not as much incentive. But like you said, when you look at it, the numbers actually were rising. And so it's interesting that, to your point, there can be a lot of noise versus what the reality is. And it goes back to, like you said, everything goes back to relationships, but can those really drive home what you need?
Yeah, absolutely. And a silver lining right now is, and the market, and we've hit some hits, but still over the years, it's been good. A lot of donors now have donor advised funds, and they make that gift in 1 year. They could give it all away the next year. Same thing with foundations. Foundations have to give out on average 5% a year. I mean, and there are a lot of philanthropists who have started foundations that say, I want to give all my money away while I'm living. So there's nothing to tell a foundation it can't give away more. It's a philosophy, right? Or an individual or family who has a donor advised fund and their organizations they're closest to are hurting now, then they may deplete it, and they know that they're going to get money back. They're going to earn their resources back. So donor advised funds are a great place to be. And then a challenge will be, we think, with a lot of federated campaigns like United Way workplace campaigns, because people aren't in the workplace anymore. So if the organizations have still relied on that in a heavy way, that might be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So talk about on your end, boards, board chairs, you're doing a lot of research around this. So dive into that world.
Yeah, well, the topic came up after a lot of happiness and pain working with great board chairs and seeing some that weren't so great, and having been a board chair myself a few times and having great mentors. So we're doing actually international study on board chairs, and we've really found some really interesting insight. And one bottom line is there was a study done in California by a national think tank a few years back, and it said that most board chairs did little or nothing to prepare to be a board chair, and so that reinforced. And part of the challenge is, and Jim Collins said this in an interview after Good to Great, the whole difference that people who are successful corporate board members don't mean they're going to be a successful nonprofit board, because the corporate board is to drive a profit to the bottom line. That's your right, but that's not the case in a not-for-profit. They are different, and certainly some skills are transferable, but it's a whole different world. So we've been doing this research with 1,400 folks so far and dozens of interviews, and what we found is amongst the folks that we interviewed, only just over half said they were somewhat prepared to be a board chair, and only 35% said they were very well prepared. And then we asked, did you receive any coaching to be prepared? 40% said some coaching, and almost half said little or no coaching. Only 8% said they received a lot of coaching to prepare. So I think, frankly, we believe that's a crisis. If we're relying on excellent board chairs to lead this huge nonprofit sector, and very few are really taking the time to prepare, that's a challenge. And there's some incredible board chairs out there, but we often don't take this seriously.
Yeah, I think that's, a lot of nonprofits struggle with onboarding, training, the pipeline, and the cultivation, like you said, of even, kind of working your way through, so that by the time you become the chair, you are a lot more ingrained in the culture, the process, the expectations, versus, hey, we're going to throw you into the fire. We need you. Now you're the chair.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree. There's so much structure and help, and nonprofits really do need so much help because they're going at it for the heart reasons, but then all of a sudden you dive in and they're running a business, and there's so many moving pieces that just they need help. So talk about on your end how you're able to help in terms of the nonprofits and that line, because everything we're talking about, these are things that you're doing and that you're guiding nonprofits on. So talk about how you can work with nonprofits and they can work with you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, if a nonprofit has a need to be more effective in fundraising, planning, or board development, then we certainly can be of help. It's a matter of leveraging our team's experience, and we're very research driven. Everything we do is based on research, so it's not cookie cutter. We are sticklers for best practices. I won't name him, but one of the major foundations in Nashville says that when you hire Lighthouse Counsel, you're going to get what you need to hear, not always what you want to hear. And we're nice about it, but we're candid, and we'd rather lose a client than do a disservice. So, but we'd be any of the listeners who would have a need, we'd be honored to partner with them, and we look forward to sharing more of this board data as our research wraps up in terms of some specifics to really help move the bar there, because we believe that the board chair is the most important role in a nonprofit. The CEO is going to come and go. The continuity of the board leadership is essential during those times, during every time. And if we can really move the bar on board chairs, then we can make a huge difference.
Talk about how we can connect in. So your website, social media, where do we go to learn more?
Absolutely. Well, our website is lighthousecounsel.com. We are not as prolific as you or as talented, but we do have a blog and a podcast, Jeremy, and we need to have you as our guest on the podcast. But it's the Beacon Podcast, and we've had, again, nonprofit leaders from around the world, around the country, some real thought leaders as our guests, and then our blog where our team writes regularly. And then if I write a regular blog for Nonprofit Pro and serve on their advisory board, so it's nonprofitpro.com. And then we are on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook for Lighthouse Counsel. So we'd love for any listeners to connect with us there.
Well, make sure everyone check them out, lighthousecounsel.com. Jeff, thank you for all you and your team do. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, Jeremy, what a pleasure. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.